And Ed, you look at the blogs and you look at places like Conservative Home, which do, offer a terrific window, I think, into, the party base and the sort of people with perhaps conservative views that are much more in keeping with Peter's than yours. And there is a great appetite for a more strongly conservative flavoured policy agenda. The uproar when grammar school stuff happened, and recently the party committed to 45p top rate of tax. I mean, there is bubbling anger there, isn't there? Which you're keeping a lid on because you need to win the election and get into power. But there is a conservative base that is not being tickled at all by what the Tory party are doing now.
Well, it's almost impossible to argue against that perspective because it's a very fundamentalist view and it's extremely appealing rhetoric. But when you're a member of a political party, several things happen. First of all, you have to, I think, have a sensible approach because you could, in 12 months' time, be in government. And secondly, the way our political system works, we don't have a proportional representation system. All political parties, to a certain extent, are a coalition of people with actually quite differing views. You could look at the Labour Party and take people from Jeremy Corbyn all the way through perhaps to Peter Mandelson and see a spectrum of views, and certainly you could probably do that in the Conservative Party. But I don't really know how to react to what Peter is complaining about. I mean, I'm a Eurosceptic. I think the Conservative Party in opposition was very successful in keeping us out of the single currency, which I think would have been the final step to losing our sovereignty. But at the same time, I don't believe that any nation in the world is completely independent, and I don't think Switzerland is completely independent, as anyone who's seen the concessions it's had to make on banking regulation in the last few weeks would agree. I don't see people marching in the streets asking us to repeal the Disability Discrimination Act, either because it's too onerous or because it's been passed by Europe. And I think most disabled people welcome the fact that there is a Disability Discrimination Act which gives them rights where they can have those rights enforced, and I think that's a good thing. I am a Conservative in the sense that I believe in tradition and I believe in the institutions of this country, but I am also a progressive in the sense that I don't want to stand and set this country in aspic and say that nothing must change. I think society is changing all the time, and I don't think that there is anything wrong, as it were, in compromise. I believe people in this country do support strongly the National Health Service. I think any party that ran for office saying we're going to abolish the National Health Service wouldn't get many votes. People always look with nostalgia at the past and say things were better then. So we have the debate about grammar schools. But people forget that grammar schools were abolished for a reason. And people forget that it was Conservative county councils that led the charge against grammar schools in the 60s, because people thought the 11 plus was an iniquitous system that separated people too young, that effectively set them down one path or the other at the age of 11, and they wanted something different. What we're proposing in education are very, very radical ideas. They're ideas to allow parents and charities to set up schools without the say-so of the local authority. And those are, I think, ideas that will be wildly popular, judging from the generation of people like me who have children about to go to school, who are desperate to have this kind of power and opportunity. And I do think that is localism, and we don't have to bow to the European Union to introduce policies like that. But if you want to vote for a party that will take you back to the 1950s, if you believe that Britain was a better place in the 1950s, then I'm afraid the Conservative Party is not for you, and Peter Hitchens is the party you should vote for.
Can I just say one final thing on this? In the end, what we've got here is a battle between idealism and pragmatism. And all politics in the end is about realpolitik, what you can actually achieve. And yes, Ed is right, all political parties are coalitions, and you have to build a coalition to get power. It's just the way politics always has been, particularly when you've got a first-past-the-post electoral system. I don't think that's a bad thing, but it separates the idealists out from those who actually have the practical task of governing. And I think actually going into politics and going into government is an honourable thing. And I really resent the implication from people like Peter that anyone who goes into politics is, by definition, a careerist and doesn't have morals, doesn't have ideals of their own.
But yes, and certainly Labour became the party of the pragmatists, they knew they needed to win power. But I think perhaps arguably there was more about New Labour that was sort of rooted in some sort of, there was a lot about modern Britain that annoyed them at the time. There were things they wanted to change. There were very clear policies that they were proposing while in opposition that distinguished them from...
I don't think I'm not sure there were.
There was a New Deal, there was a minimum wage, there were meaty stuff.
They're individual policies, but what was the big idea that rooted New Labour together? What did it stand for? What did it stand for? It stood for the opposite of whatever old Labour was and whatever had costed it votes. I mean, as I said at the beginning, the trouble with the Conservative Party is that fundamentally it hasn't changed. We're still a party that believes in the community, in individuals. We don't think the government provides solutions. We think that people in this room are much more likely to find the answers to their own problems than government is. We don't believe in a big and overbearing state. We don't believe in high taxes. Those are the ideas that remain consistent. We can't necessarily repackage ourselves as bright, shiny New Labour. But what we have done is not... The lesson we learnt, I think, from the defeats of the late 90s and early noughties is that when a party is on its knees, it tends to, it's very weak and it tends to get pushed to the extreme. And in order to get coverage, in order to make an impact, you end up talking about what are fundamentally not the kind of issues that voters are motivated by, that ordinary men and women actually fundamentally care about. Now, I think the European Union is a very important issue, and I would like to take more power back from Europe. But if we banged on only and solely about Europe, the electorate would switch off, because what they want to know is what we're going to do about hospitals, what we're going to do about schools, and what we're going to do about dozens of other things that affect their daily life.